Well, welcome to our third webinar, Share the Faith Ministries. My name is Deacon Chris Purdef. I am the Business Development Coordinator for Share the Faith, and I've been working with Share the Faith Ministries for over a year. Just a little bit about our organization. We are a nonprofit pan-Orthodox organization dedicated to leading people to Orthodoxy through raising monies to supplement Orthodox clergy who serve very small, needy mission parishes in North America. Our website is sharethefaith.net. And believe it or not, more than 50% of all Orthodox priests in the U.S. work a secular job just to keep food on the table. So, our mission is to kind of help alleviate a little bit of the stress that may cause for them by providing stipends, monthly stipends for them. The monies also go help towards the mission as well. I think we are serving around 12 mission priests right now, if I'm not mistaken. So we are dependent on donations. So please, keep that in mind. This webinar today will be recorded, and we will have it up on our YouTube page probably a few days after it's done, depending upon technical matters and when we're able to upload it. Our YouTube page is Orthodox Christian Ministries. So we're glad to have in attendance today Father Jesse Rimshas. He's one of our participant priests. He is mission priest of St. Jacobs of Alaska in Marquette, Michigan. Welcome, Father Jesse. We have Father George Aquaro, who is also a mission priest, St. Catherine's Mission in Pullman, Washington. Is that correct? And then we will also have shortly Father Turbo Qualls join us, who is parish priest in St. Mary of Egypt in, I believe, Kansas City, Missouri. So Father Jesse is part of the ROCOR Archdiocese or Patriarchate. Father George is part of the Antiochian, and Father Turbo is part of the Serbian Church. Our topic today is diversity in Orthodox missions in the United States, namely how that affects building Orthodox missions, or maybe it doesn't affect. We'll attempt to discuss that today. Can kind of get a variety of viewpoints, and maybe get some answers. And also, we're going to allow our visitors to ask questions as we can. I'll try to get to them as best as I can. We have about maybe 7, 8 questions that I'd like to ask. But depending on what I see in the chat room, if those questions kind of pique my fancy, I might skip one of mine and add those. So we'll see how it goes. All right. So the first question that I was able to get from kind of en masse online viewing is the concept of diversity. In kind of the modern societal context, many people believe that concept has transformed laws and culture and human interaction. How has this view, if we can encompass it, this view of diversity, how is it compatible or incompatible with Orthodoxy? Let Father Jesse start with that.
Sure. Well, I mean, in terms of, it's a very hot button topic right now, of course, with the new administration, everything else, DEI. But that's not really what we're going for. So we're completely separate, right? We're different from the secular world. Diversity to me just means you reach out to everybody, right? And so you're not trying to leave anybody out, right? So in an ethnic parish, I suppose, and we're not an ethnic parish, but an ethnic parish, I suppose this means that you reach out to the English speakers or to people who are not from the old country, descended from those of the old country. And I think a good many, maybe most ethnic parishes are very good about that, in my experience. And we're almost, we're very strongly a convert parish, just a few cradles. And to me, it's not necessarily results, but it's who you're willing to reach out to. We are more ethnically diverse than the community around us. And that's just kind of the way it happened. But the community around us, right, is Upper Michigan. So we're talking overwhelmingly white and Finnish and Italian.
Hmm.
So a little bit different that way. Um, but at the same time, we reach out to whoever God sends our way, and we try to get more people. One of the things that has been very, I think, inspiring to our entire parish is starting a food pantry. And we just got
Hmm.
results in last night. We've donated almost 1,000 pounds, or I guess that includes what we have in our pantry right now. But we've acquired almost 1,000 pounds of food, right? And we've been open for less than a year, and distributing to whoever comes. We're very close. We're actually in the bottom of a 1950s middle school that got converted to Section 8 apartments. And so those people come down quite a bit. And we haven't gotten anybody new from that. But at the same time, we're fulfilling God's directive to care for the poor and to reach out to others. So I think it's being open. It's being open to other people, and being able to invite everybody in.
Father George?
Here, I had to turn my microphone on. Well, yeah, diversity is, oh, I think it's a complicated question just from like, what are you marketing or marking for in your, what makes people different versus the same? Um, we, like when Father Jesse said is we're always trying to get anybody who come, um, and there's ups, there's positives and there's negatives to that. My previous parish was a full size parish, and it was split kind of down the middle between people who were ethnically Middle Eastern, let's say Palestinian, Jordanian, Lebanese, some Syrian, and people who were like ethnically American. Um, and it was a constant struggle, and there was a lot of infighting that would go on because what's acceptable in one culture is not acceptable in the other culture.
Hmm.
And getting people to understand is okay, they're doing that because they always do that, and they do it with good intentions, goodwill. Um, it's very hard to get other people to accept that when you've always been told that's the wrong thing to do. Um, and I mean, and it causes in trying to manage parish life, getting people to see the best in others is really kind of a struggle. I mean, I remember one just absolutely raging battle in our parish was the Middle Eastern families made sure that their kids would go through the food line at the trapeza, and they would like put this huge pile of food on top of the plate. They would take 3 bites and they would run outside and play. And the Anglo families that were raised under the Clean Plate Club, pleases God the most, they would freak out and like, those kids are wasting all that food, and we should. And I actually had like parents like yelling at other parents, "You should make your kids eat their food." And what are you doing? And you get into these kind of like battles with trying to, as a priest, you have to kind of study your people, um, almost like it's like almost like a scientific subject.
Hmm.
Get into their sociology. I was reading books on Arab culture and things like that, and kind of understanding where the Americans are coming from. And now I'm in a mission where we have kind of a significant Hispanic segment, but most of them are kind of what everybody looking at a glance on the outside says, oh, they're just about white people. Um, but actually you get into them and they're very different culturally within that, and they don't always get along. And there's been some kind of misunderstandings and things that I've had to kind of step in because they don't, um, and it can even be things like people come from a Calvinist background versus a non-Calvinist background. And like, woohoo. Um, So it's always it's kind of a game to try to bring everyone in and make everyone welcome, and then at the same time trying to figure out how to keep people from turning on one another over those kind of cultural differences.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and we have to expand on that. Obviously, both you and Father Jesse kind of hit on that when we use the word diversity, obviously it may have one meaning or one context when we pick up our phones and scroll through X or listen to the news. And then in an Orthodox standpoint, it may mean that plus all the other denominations that, have now, they're coming in from whatever handful of Reformed denominations, Roman Catholicism. That too is also a form of diversity that we understand. So I'm glad, we kind of broadened the topic there. Father Turbo, I don't know if you heard the question. Basically, the question is the concept of diversity kind of in the modern context. And you can take this any way you want, take the freedom to talk about how you view it. It's transformed laws, it's transformed culture and how we interact. That concept of diversity, how compatible or incompatible do you think that is with orthodoxy?
Well, um, I guess it depends on how we want to chop it up.
Sure.
In regards of, orthodoxy as the church, um, on the old calendar, we just celebrated Saint Theodosius the Great.
Mhm.
And if you recall, Saint Theodosius, he had the Greeks, he had the Armenians, he had the Syrians, various others all gathered in his cenobium, and he had arranged for them to be able to be together, in their own kind of culture, as evidenced by their language, but they all came together for the divine liturgy, and they were all, united in under the Greek in Greek language for the Eucharist. I mean, I think that's an interesting example of what it looks like. I mean, we could just talk all day about this because it's a both and in regards of it has its problems, it's problematic, but it's also beneficial in the sense of um, it's problematic because on the one hand, like you take for instance my parish, which is I feel very comfortable saying a very kind of diverse parish in the sense of you have people from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. You have people from very different religious traditions. You have middle class, working class, those in all but abject poverty by an American standard. We have wealthy people in our parish, um, and even as we know, class isn't monolithic, and it's not. It isn't even stuck to just one group. You have poor black people, you have rich black people, you have poor white people. I'm in the Midwest, so I'm in Kansas City, so there's plenty of poor quote unquote white folks. So the diversity in our parish is very strong in that sense. But if you look at it from a different perspective, not so much because you only have a few cradles. So the one thing we all have is to some degree of we're American in the sense of kind of Western culture, Western ethos. Even we have a like Father George, which is great to see you, by the way, Father. I haven't seen you in like 20 years. But it's we have this growing contingent of Spanish speakers, which I think a lot of parishes have. And within that, Puerto Rico, Mexico, El Salvador, they're not the same, and I'm from Southern California, so I know firsthand that there's a big difference. Mexican and El Salvadorian are not the same. They speak Spanish, but even their Spanish is very different. I grew up in Garden Grove, and I grew up around Islanders, Pacific Islanders. I'll tell you, do not confuse a Tongan with a Samoan. You're gonna have real problems if you confuse a Tongan and Samoan. So I think the thing is and I'm going to kind of like touch on one of the elephants in the room, and I hopefully this will be helpful in the larger conversation about evangelism. But I think part of what we're dealing with when we say the word diversity is that it's a loaded term, and we're all fighting against this kind of specter of certain political ideologies that tend to be very far left, which are not really compatible with orthodoxy. And that's a very strong statement, but I feel very strong about it. Um, and I think that what we need to understand is, first and foremost, people need to meet Christ. And, the way I explain it, because it's kind of one of the things I talk about a lot, but for me, I've understood this as the meta culture. The church is the meta culture. And so in the same way, and I don't want anybody, I'm with the Serbs, so don't anybody run too far with Saint Theodosius, because like everyone came under the Greek. We don't want to we don't want to misinterpret that, right? But um, but in that same sense, there's this meta culture, right? And so wherever the body of Christ has been, you have things of this meta culture. You have relics, you have iconography, you have liturgy, and you have all the morals and tradition, small t, big T, that you find revealed in the scripture. And all of those things are what make the meta culture, which is the incarnation. Wherever the body of Christ is incarnated, that meta culture is there. And that meta culture will then go and, like the dew, settle on that lower culture and baptize it. And so therefore you have people, on the east side of Kansas City, punk rockers and plumbers, who are trying to, enter into theosis via illumination, but mostly through a long, long decades of purification. And that purification comes in learning to not strangle that kid who's, middle class and entitled, black, white, brown, other. I mean, that sounds absurd, but really, don't we all agree that's how that happens? It's by learning to love in a real sense, not in a kind of external pietistic way, but in a way of learning to bear the cross with people, learning to suffer with them. And I think ultimately this revelation of Pentecost is where we find that tension of diversity being really fulfilled. Because when we enter into this knowing of Jesus, of the Trinity in the Holy Spirit and the sacramental life, and the way that permeates our households and our neighborhoods and our communities, then that diversity becomes something that is a revelation of God's love and the healing of the fall. So I don't know if I answered it, but I think I wanted to kind of, just put a couple touch points on it for us to look at. I don't know if that was helpful at all. Forgive me.
No, it was. I mean, I came into this, we talked about it as a group at Share the Faith. We kind of came into this as with an open book. There's not going to be, I mean, in a sense, there are right or wrong answers when we're talking about the church, but there's going to be kind of a broad spectrum of understanding. And I think that's okay to bring out the social worker in me. It's okay. Um, and we've all had our different experiences, obviously. Probably within this room, some of us are converts, some of us are cradle. And we've noticed, kind of growing up, we've noticed certain things, and sometimes it's not an easy phenomenon to kind of encompass in a parish. So I think some of this information will help a lot of the mission priests, and hopefully as this conversation goes out, maybe we can help some other priests who might be struggling with some things, and
I
when
mean,
we
well,
go
forgive
ahead,
me, Father.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, in regards to mission specifically,
Hmm.
and the mission field of America, and the mission field of America in the 21st century, and the mission field of America in the 21st century, post this kind of ideological, we're in this kind of like demilitarized zone. It feels
Mhm.
like ideologically, where everything's been exposed. There's been this kind of like apocalypse, and now everyone kind of sees all the different agendas that various ideologies have had, left, right, center. And what we find is that in this wreckage, we're able to navigate a little bit better, I think, in a more honestly, what we need to do in regards to missions. So,
Mhm.
for instance, you have to take in mind that if you're not aware of, your audience, you're not aware of some of the foibles of that particular enculturation of how the church is, then you're not going to be able to pastor them, right? I think one of the problems people have is it isn't just always about trying to find out where the sheep shouldn't be eating, but also making sure that they're staying where they need to stay. And what I mean by that is this: um, some I've talked with some people where they have really good ideas, for instance, and they have really great ideas about trying to kind of bring the spirit of Pentecost, let's say. So that's code word for having a diverse parish, right? But I'm like, you actually might be hindering your parish by trying to bring a great idea, but in the wrong locality or the wrong time and wrong place, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because um, diversity for me and my thought in the sense of missions is just being aware that the one thing that we really got going for us in America is we're sitting at the smorgasbord. Like we are buffet eaters. We like our golden corrals. We like our hometown buffets. We like having quantity and variety. That's as Americans, that's what we like. And I think we just kind of need to own that a little bit. But I think the
Mhm.
thing is, as Orthodox Christians, we can't lose ourselves and become gluttons. And so what that means is, yes, you may be able to have a variety of expressions, but maybe you shouldn't. Yeah, maybe, just maybe you need to read the room as a mission priest or as a community building a mission. And look, if you guys are solidly, I'm just making stuff up right now, but if you're just solidly rooted in, like, say Carpatho-Russian tradition,
Mhm.
and that's those are the tones you use, and you're in Pennsylvania, don't 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 think, oh, we need to bring in some Byzantine, and then we need to try to do this and do that to try to flavor it up, and then maybe it'll attract these people that are never going to come to your parish. And so what happens is, we don't take into account where our flock really is, and that
Mhm.
perhaps maybe even if we as the priest, we may have a broader understanding, a deeper understanding, but our sheep just need to eat this good solid patch that they've been feeding on, and that's where Christ is calling us to be faithful. I just wanted to bring that up because I think that all of us are tempted to get out ahead of our flock, and tempted to get out ahead of where the people are actually at. And
Mhm.
I have found that can be, it's a balance, right? Because we always want to draw them and call them to higher things, but we have to be careful, especially when you're establishing mission, because I'm a firm believer that a mission needs to reflect as much as possible, as much as the Spirit will allow, the demographics of that particular community. And
Mhm.
sometimes diversity can, great idea in the right context. In New York, you better have diversity. If you don't, something's weird. In certain parts of California, where I'm at, it's absolutely appropriate. And if it's not there, something's wrong. Conversely, you know, Rust Belt, I don't know if that's really the way to go. I think these are the types of things that we should really, as Orthodox Christians, be more comfortable and discussing in really kind of frank terms,
Okay.
for the sake of the higher mission of the meta culture.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I appreciate the answers to that. I know this isn't an easy topic to kind of get through in 45 minutes to an hour, but I mean, you brought it up, Father Turbo, and I'll bring it to the group. I mean, obviously, you mentioned the elephant in the room right now in the United States, and beyond. The concept of diversity has taken on a kind of an ideological aspect to it. It's gotten full-fledged. It's a full-fledged ideology, if not to say it's almost its own religion in a sense. Um, when that enters the parish, sometimes it enters the parish overtly. You can see it. Sometimes I've noticed it enters the parish almost masked with Orthodox concepts. Um, how does a priest or clergy or even leaders in a parish, how do they, if they're going to start a mission, how do they bring those individuals to the norm? If they are doing it at all, I mean, how would they do that? I mean, and we can start with, maybe Father Jesse, and then we can go around the room again.
Well, I think obviously, I mean, always as individuals, right? So we don't come up with a great theory and then say, "Oh, this is how I'm going to deal with this problem." If there's an issue, you go through the individual and hopefully through the sacrament of confession or maybe some other conversations if it's not brought up there. You address it and you address it with compassion as well as honesty. And then also, I'll just say too, we talk about diversity. I think part of that is absolutely diversity in political views, absolutely diversity in ways of looking at the world. And it may be, that as people come closer to Christ, those political views may change. And obviously, there's some things, abortion, euthanasia, et cetera, et cetera. They're just slightly unacceptable as Orthodox Christians. But as far as who you vote for and things like that, that's something that again is going to have diversity in a parish, and it's really, in my opinion, it's not something that I would be addressing my parishioners about directly, right? Because that's not my place. Will political views sometimes change as people develop as Orthodox human beings? Yeah, and I think all of us change, of course, as we grow closer to Christ and grow more in the Orthodox faith and hopefully closer to Christ in the theosis. Um, but I think letting people grow and at the same time putting up some guardrails so there's not damage, right, in interpersonal relationships and trying to talk people through things and always with a ton of patience. I mean, patience, patience, patience. God has been patient with me. I have no right to be impatient with a parishioner who maybe has some views that need some adjusting or who's approaching something in an unorthodox way. It takes time and takes growth.
Father George?
Yeah, all this stuff is really good. It's good to see you again, Father Turbo. Long time. An honor to be with you today. But yeah, I was just thinking that years back when I was investigating Christianity, I hadn't even really gotten settled into the Orthodox Church, but I was kind of trying to find out what Christianity was, and I went to this one church, and I went there for a couple Sundays, kind of just hung out in the back, and finally I got up the nerve to kind of approach the pastor at some point, and um, he said to me, with just absolutely sincere tone, everything else. He says, "You're not part of the demographics that I'm looking for in this community. And so you might want to think about going somewhere else. And I can, maybe offer you some suggestions on that." And I was like, wow. um, and then I actually had a similar experience much later, actually, in an Orthodox context. I was being introduced to this Greek bishop, and I had been in seminary and knew a little bit of Greek, and I'd actually lived in Greece for a while, so I had a little bit of Greek. And the priest who was introducing me to the bishop asks in Greek, is he Greek? And the priest says, no, he's a foreigner. And I'm like, wait a sec. I was born in this country, and you're calling me a foreigner? I will never deal with those people again. You go, oh, I got a resentment over that. But you know, we should be open open to all, and that means that both we in receiving new people or different people need to take the time to figure them out and find out what they're all about, and try to share the gospel with them, and but at the same time say, these are kind of the rules, these are the guardrails that we have. And in our particular area up here, when we talk about politics, okay, I'm in my mission is in Pullman, Washington, which is walking distance from Moscow, Idaho. And if you've been paying attention to the news, there's a big movement here called Christian nationalism. And that's a big debate going on up here over that. And it's, we had a deep division because I'm in a college town. So we do have people who are on both sides of the political aisle. And I had to walk this very, it isn't for me difficult to say this is what the church teaches. I'm not going to get into partisan anything, because as far as I've been able to tell, at least like from the standpoint of my church, Republicans and Democrats have both been involved with bombing our churches. So I got no horse in this race. But what I try to remind people is that the function of the church, when it comes to like political issues, is to be the conscience of a nation. We're not here to wield the sword. We're the ones that say, hey, maybe you need to put the sword back in the sheath right now. And I think that taking that kind of approach, I've had people who are on both sides of the political aisle who have stayed in the church because they have seen that, frankly, every political system's got some kind of problem with the gospel at some point, and you have to just kind of be aware of that there's no perfect solution to any of this stuff. So, anyhow,
Okay.
that's
Father
me.
Turbo?
Well, I'm kind of the black swan, pun intended, unicorn in the situation. Um, I I've kind of seen the gamut. I really have. Um, and I think I'm kind of a one trick pony, in the sense of, for me, things are very simple, and I can be that guy at the party that everyone wants to kind of get out real quickly, kind of like get him his party favors and get him out. Because for me, it really is about, have you encountered Christ? And it's, people ask me, they go like, hey, how's your bishop? Have you met him? And my comment to everyone that they ask me, I go, well, my bishop's a Christian. And I've had some people say, like, that's kind of an odd statement. I'm like, well, been in the church long enough, you know that's not an odd statement. And so for me, the highest compliment I can give someone is they're a Christian. And a Christian, to me, when I say it, is someone who actually has met Christ and is a disciple. Because I've known people, I know people who have met Christ and have chosen to not walk with him. And I think that is something people need to keep in mind also, that everything isn't a matter of, they just don't know any better. Some people know better and they choose otherwise. And the reason why I'm saying that is because in regards of ideology, I had like 6 months when I was into Reformed theology. I listened to R.C. Sproul, so like I never really got into like Calvinism. I never really had some of that. I was never infected with that kind of that bitterness that can happen. I don't know if anyone understands what I'm saying, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because for me, when the theology, the doctrine of the church says that God created man good, not, utterly debased, I didn't have to fight against that. And so the reason why I'm saying that in this context is you have to understand I have a godson who was a white supremacist at one point. I've had people leave this parish, um, and I've had people leave my parish because they were upset with me not lining up ideologically on some things. Um, Namely, and I'm not saying this to necessarily tip my hand, but it's just to kind of prove my point, because I didn't fall, you know, um, I didn't goose step in line with like Black Lives Matter stuff, and they left. It's so tragically ironic. They left the parish with the one black priest to go somewhere else with. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like but I just think it's funny because I feel comfortable saying this, like in North America and in the United States, I probably have the most black people in my parish if we're looking at things like that. Um, and it's not what you would think.
Mhm.
And the reason why is because Christ. Because whether someone came in super left, super right, I have people who are ex witches, ex Masons. I have everything in here. And the key thing is they're ex. They're no longer that thing. They're now Orthodox, and not just a name, because that's the new thing with mission, right? You got a lot of young men, some women, a lot of young men coming in because of ideology. And, you know, some of them just, too bad for them, but I'm the fisherman who caught them and I'm cleaning the fish. So I've, this has kind of been my thing. I work really hard to make sure the fish are clean. And so this ideology, whichever way it's taking someone, the cross of Christ is the thing that cleans those scales real good. And what I find is once that's done, um, everyone begins to see things in a real similar sense, not in a weird culty, everyone's drinking from the same Kool-Aid thing, because people's predilections, their tastes, again, class is class. Class is harder to bake out of someone than ideology. If you know anything about class, that's harder. And class will divide someone quicker than ideology, because you can get two people that voted for the same candidate, but if they're on the different spectrum via class, you have cultures, manners, ways of very different. But the point being is, I'm, this is the church is the ark. And so in that sense, I'm grateful to God because I got elephants and lions and aardvarks and snakes. I got everything in this ark here at this parish.
Mhm.
And the one thing is I'm the papa bear, so I carry, I carry that seriously in the sense of trying to really keep the main one, because he's not a thing, he's a person, the main one. And that we can't get tired of that. And if we feel like our people are getting tired of that and they want something spicy, I got brother priests who, I know they struggle with um, trying to keep their homilies, clean. Not clean like Eddie Murphy, not like that, but but clean in the sense of, not trying to veer off and really step out of line and start talking about things that aren't relating to people's salvation, the gospel. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't address people's reality, but the reason why I'm saying this, and the reason why I think this is pertinent in this conversation is what I find is when you have in America the plurality that we're just swimming in, like just that's what America is based on in a general sense. The only way to really navigate that in any meaningful way is to make sure that because Christ is the one who can hit the person right where they need to be hit in a way that it's not you wielding the stick, if that makes sense. And people will feel it. They'll know, like, I don't know why it is, but every time you have a homily, you're telling me something I don't want to hear, but I'm grateful for it. And I'm like, that's the Holy Spirit. That's not me. That's not me, right? And so, but where does that come from? That comes from just having that commitment that as a priest, who's trying to, in regards of missions and building out, bringing the master all the fruits of his suffering. I just having that mindset, like I first and foremost serve him. I first and foremost represent him. I first and foremost I'm working to make sure that people justify him in their daily lives. And then from there, I'm broken bread and poured out wine for the people. So I think the ethos of priests and those who are coming up in the ranks and those who are going out into the fields, I think, forgive me for my rambling. I think that's the thing that maybe if there was somebody who had any pull or any weight in regard to seminaries or things like that, I think that's the thing that needs to be put attention to in ways that, for decades, I feel like hasn't really been the thing, really trying to give priests an ethos of that unwavering dedication to Christ in regards of, Christ being real, not just an ideology, Christ actually holding you accountable to these things. Because once you have the fear of God in that sense, that will help you to not get off quote unquote script. And it helps you to navigate these issues of various ideologies, temperaments, all these things,
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate your answers, fathers. Excuse me. And we are nearing the 45-minute mark. So I want to be courteous of your time. I'm just going to ask one more question. Obviously, we didn't get to all the questions, but that's perfectly fine. This is it's a topic we can, as you mentioned, Father, we can talk about for hours. But in this particular question is a little bit taking diversity back towards the cradle, convert, diverse spectrum. It's from one of our participants in the room, and he asks, what are the challenges or benefits for having parishes that are high percentage cradle or culturally Orthodox versus a parish that is, say, 95% Protestant convert versus a mix of, say, close to 50-50? Are there benefits to having a parish that's more balanced cradle convert, or is it benefit to have in the United States, starting a mission, would it be more beneficial to have a parish that's more convert oriented? And we'll start from the top. Father Jesse, if you want to start there, and how you're handling it, how you're viewing it, and we go around again.
Well, you have to deal with what you have, right? And geographically, I mean, that's where missions start out is, hey, we need the body of Christ here. People need to be able to convert to Christ, to Orthodoxy here in this place. And so you deal with what you have. I can only speak for what I have, and that is overwhelmingly convert. And I think there's benefits to that. I think when somebody comes to the church and you baptize them and you've catechized them, I mean, we're very small, right? But I like to tell my brother priests, we're very small but very mighty, right? We've got some very dedicated people. We've got some great talent in the parish. We have just some wonderful people. And perhaps somebody who had grown up with our Orthodoxy, and it wasn't this thing that they had lacked for so long in their lives, and they had been searching for the truth for so long. Perhaps they would not, at least almost instinctively have that level of dedication. That being said, I mean, cradles are great, and I want more of them. And really, so I had just a wonderful, beautiful parishioner come up to me and say, God bless you, Father. You're teaching these people things that my grandmother taught me when I was 4 years old. I said, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, Babushka. And I'm thinking, I need to learn the things that your grandmother taught you when you were 4 years old. When you were 4 years old. So we can learn from that experience, and just kind of the cultural side of Orthodoxy that sometimes gets talked down a little bit too much sometimes. What do we do in our daily lives? How do we remember Christ in our daily lives? when you're a convert, you're kind of building all that from scratch, and you need to do it. You need to do it very intentionally, step by step. How do I remember Christ? What are the traditions of in my case, what are the traditions of the Russian Church, or just pious traditions of Russian laymen that I can pick up. You look over the Serbs, what the Serbs have, and these sorts of things, the Antiochians, the Greeks, whatever. But I think you have to be very intentional if you don't have that example of cradle Orthodox. At the same time, if you're mostly one way or mostly the other, you're probably not going to have probably too much conflict, I would assume. We have no experience with conflict between cradle and convert. I mean, the cradles are just very, very accepting of those who come in, the newly baptized, and those who've come in years ago. And our converts are really just kind of in awe, of our babushkas who we've had and others that we've had who just bring this experience with them. So, glory to God. It's not been a difficult issue for us, but I mean, really, it's a theoretical question. I don't do very well with theoretical questions. It's just, what has God given you? What has God given you in your community, that where you are intending to start a mission, and then you just got to go from there. And of course, rely on your tradition, rely on your bishops, whether that's the Greek tradition, the Antiochian tradition, the Russian tradition, Serbian, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Father George?
I clicked the wrong button. Well, I've had both good and bad experiences with everybody on to be honest. Because I've had a lot of cradled people who they only know about the church from coming to Pascha on occasion and what you do at a funeral and how to party at a wedding, and all the rest of the stuff is kind of a mystery. And so I think getting back to what Father Turbo was talking about earlier is that you really have to stick with the basics. Because even when you're dealing with new people who are coming in, most of them have a long memory of being a Christian and having very certain beliefs about what the gospel says and all that. And you can't take any of that for granted. You really have to start from scratch. And because some of them think that they kind of they come in the door already knowing everything. And the challenge to that is getting both the cradle people who again have some memories of practices, and then the people who are coming in completely flat-footed to start saying, okay, this is what the gospel says, and this is how we enact it. These are things that you need to, like cradle people know that there's prayers, and they know that like there's long prayers, and they had somebody in their family who prayed. The Protestant, let's say, person coming in knows that there's prayers, they've got certain ideas about them, but has no practice of it, of like a daily prayer thing, other than when they feel like praying, they pray. And when they don't feel like praying, they don't.
Mhm.
And saying, no, this is how we structure it. And this is, so I think everyone on kind of both sides of the fence struggles with the same thing, which is to be humble and assume that you don't know everything, that you do need to go back to this stuff. Because even we as priests, it's very easy after I've been out of seminary since 2001, and it's very easy to fall back on my laurels. I've done all this before. I've got big shelves full of books I've read. But I need to actually I'm starting to now, because I'm dealing with more and more people coming in with very precise theological questions, and sometimes it's I don't know. I gotta go back and look. Not sure how to say this correctly. Um, so it's we're keep it simple. I'm not going to use the last S in that. Um, but keeping it simple, stick with the basics, the foundations, and you'll find that everybody has a hard time with that, whether you're cradle or you're raised in the church. Everybody struggles with forgiveness, patience, the virtues. They're hard. They're really hard. And And that's what I try to emphasize with people is you're not trying to like check off boxes of I know all the seven ecumenical councils and I know what happened here and I have all these saints that I can name drop. And instead say, well, do you love your neighbor? Do you love your enemies? Oh my goodness, I don't like them at all. Well, that's what this is all about, though. That's where you're coming here, right? And so yeah, that's my take on it.
Well, let me kind of throw this in. Father Jesse, I'll let you have a crack at it if you want, but let me add this to it now. As far as the influx of all the converts coming in, do you find that maybe that is sort of changing the ethos of Orthodoxy in the United States? Maybe are you finding? I know there's a lot of people who like to throw, we have an Orthodoxy flavored in Anglicanism or Episcopalianism, or people. I've heard people come in and tell me, well, that certain parish has it's Orthodox, the practice is Orthodox, but you can tell it's very Protestant driven because it's almost like if the goal is the end game to get sort of the mind of the church, which is there's no question about what that is, and that ethos of Orthodoxy. Do you think the sort of all the converts that are coming in, do you find that they have difficulty letting go of some of how they view Christianity, sort of with that reformed mentality? Is that a problem at all, or is that just kind of a fugazi? It's nothing.
Well, I'll take that one. So I think it's well, I mean, I think it is a problem a lot of times. A lot of times the opposite is a problem. I'm going to react to everything that I was taught growing up and go to the opposite extreme.
Mm.
As far as, how has it changed Orthodoxy in the United States? The influx of converts. One thing, that just a personal pet peeve, you can't do Orthodox on the internet, right? I mean, you can go to different decent websites or things like that, but just get off Facebook, get off the, I mean, don't discuss it online if you don't have to discuss it online. I mean, maybe, okay, a little bit, but you got to go to church, right? And there are people out there, there are people in my city there, who, will even consider themselves practicing Orthodox people, but never set foot in an Orthodox church. And I know there's many people like this throughout the United States, and it becomes a cerebral thing, and that's not Orthodoxy. We've really, really, really done ourselves a strong disservice in this country if that's our mindset, because Orthodoxy is people, and it's actually physical matter and physicality and stepping on your neighbor's toes and getting your toes stepped on and all these things that are hard and difficult. And so yeah, it's easier to stay at home. But yeah, you have to actually go to church. You have to get out there. You have to be faithful. You have to do things you don't feel like doing. And I mean, in trapeza or lunchtime, I mean, probably the conversations at our parish are different than a lot of others. We're probably similar to a lot of convert parishes where there's a lot of some general talk, but there's a lot of theological talk as well. I really like the theological talk. I really like the questions. Oh, have you heard about this? This is the app I use. Father, what about this? What about that? And I'll actually go into, hey, guys, have you considered this? Have you thought about this aspect of the incarnation or whatever? Right. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Are there different flavors culturally? Yeah, but that's not a bad thing. We don't allow in our parish, really in our diocese mostly, political talk in church. It's just not allowed. It's just divisive. There's no good that can come out of it at church, in my opinion. Right. But let's talk about, I encourage to talk about good things, to talk about the saints, and talk about Christ. Saint stories are a great thing for lunchtime. So anyway, that's what I got. Did I lose audio, or are you muted, Father?
Father Turbo, do you want to have a crack at it? I'm sorry.
Sure, you're muted. I wasn't sure what you're saying. Um, yeah, sorry, one trick pony coming in again. I do have some cradles here besides my own kids because they're cradle. Uh, you know, and I've had this experience. I have spiritual children who aren't in my parish. who have been in the church their whole life, Greek, Russian, um, and this is a hard one in the sense of there's this kind of consensus that I think people have, but my experience kind of undoes it, and that is I have met people who have been in the church their whole lives and they're over 40, right? So we're not talking about 20-year-olds or 15-year-olds, 40, 50, 60, and they've had their kind of conversion moments. Been in the Greek church their whole life, been in Russian church their whole life, and they have their conversion moments, and it's palpable. You can measure it. They're one way for decades, and then something happens. They encounter Christ, and now they're different. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I think people are people. I really believe that. I really, people are people, until they meet Christ, and then something happens. So I think the thing is I like what Father Jesse just had to say, because I'm just really, really, really like zeroed in on what can I do to facilitate. It's ultimately the Holy Spirit's job, but what can I do to facilitate people encountering Christ? Because I'll give you an example. We have babushkas here, but we like our black babushkas. Like the black grandma who's making macaroni cheese with a crumble top, and is not scared to tell a kid to pull his pants up or do whatever. I mean, what makes the yaya and the babushka the yaya and the babushka? Is it that they're Greek? Is it that they're Orthodox? Or is it that they're a woman who has lived a life, raised kids, struggled, has decided to try to remain faithful to God as much as she can, and then part of that is her like giving the young kids, the young ladies, the business. I don't really see a big difference between black grandma and yaya. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't, because here's the thing that kills people. Yaya. Someone with yaya's got superstition. Just forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
It's pious superstition, but still superstition. Like, let's just be, you know what I mean? So I think, man, I'm glad. Well, I could just get my card pulled for saying this, but I just, Father George said something that's really true. It's like, I think we're in a really great time, but in a real dangerous time too. You got, I'm, it sounds crazy to people, but I know Father George, you'll know what I'm saying. When I came into the church, you'd be there. I mean, it was kind of shocking now how much was translated in English. Forgive me, I say this, people, and they're kind of like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, no, no, no. When my wife and I first came to the church, before we even baptized, there really wasn't a ton of stuff in English, especially in comparison to now. Why am I saying this? Well, this is why I'm saying that. This is because I just think that we're in a real dangerous time where you have catechumens coming in that have consumed, without hyperbole, hundreds of hours of content on the internet. And to Father Jesse's point, they don't, they don't know how to get their toes stepped on without losing their mind. You know, that that's a real, real, real problem. And it is changing the landscape in the sense of, yes, it is making Orthodoxy a kind of cerebral thing, but more importantly, I I don't think a lot of priests are really prepared for that. I really don't, because to what Father George said, I don't even know if there's something that you can pull off the shelf and really like read at this point. I really don't. Um, I think that we're coming to a time where, like the reality of people's experience is such that it isn't, and it cannot be peppered with some of the real beneficial things that we might all say about traditional cradle culture. Like even if we're saying objectively that that's a good thing and we wish we could have more of it, you're not going to get it. How do you import that? What are you going to do? So what we're having to do is we're having to deal with people who are kind of Gnostic, you know, um, barbarians in the sense of, in regards of like the Exeni, they're like, they're foreigners, right? Okay. And really kind of embracing that in the sense of this is, I digress. I think we need to really work on equipping priests with the main thing in a way that has never been before, at least not in anybody's here's current memory of what seminary education is. Because the reality of it is some of that info, not in the sense of the dogmatic aspect of it, but in the sense of the way it's transmitted and the way maybe it's being processed. It's not outdated, but it's becoming obsolete because it isn't moving the needle of where people that are these influx of people that are coming in. It's not moving the needle for them. And you can't fight fire with fire. You have to fight fire with water. And so I think a lot of priests and communities aren't being equipped with the proper water because we are still thinking that there are certain things that are going to make us quote unquote Orthodox. And I'll never forget, it was one of those moments where I was like, thank God, I know I'm crazy, but I'm not alone, right? Father Gregory Joyce, I hope it's okay if I mention his name. Father Gregory Joyce, good friend of mine, asked me to speak at his parish. This is like, I don't know. It was like 15 years ago, something like that. I don't know. So I speak at his parish. I mean, they're Russians, like Russians. And nobody talked to me the first day I was there. I was there at Vespers. There's 11. Nobody talked to me. Nobody talked to me. Sunday rolls through. Nobody talks to me. And I mean nobody. Father Gregory and his family. That's it. And then, it's time for me to give my talk, my presentation. And I was talking about Orthodoxy in America. It's 15 years ago, at least, if not longer. And, I kind of look up, I look at the room, and it's, it's a nice balmy, Moscow day. Like, it's cold in there. No one, like, why is this guy here? So I look around and I basically say to everyone, I said, look, because of your background and because of my background being a little bit different, I'm going to assume that you guys can keep a secret. And I'm assuming, especially coming out of Soviet times, many of you probably, if not yourselves directly, you have family members that are coming out of Soviet times. So you can keep a secret. And everyone is just kind of like, what is this guy going to say? And I looked around, I said, you cannot tell anybody, but I'm Black. Right. And so I told the joke, and the whole parish just like erupted in laughter. And then after the talk, you know what happened? People started talking to me. They started coming up to me and sharing with me. And the reason why I'm telling that story is because it was a human experience that needed to happen. And if I had have showed up there, not that I could have got away with it anyways, maybe Father Jesse could have gotten away with it for 15 minutes until he opened his mouth. Maybe Father George could have gotten away with it until he opened his mouth. But no one was going to think I'm Russian. You know what I mean? I started off in the Antiochian church. Nobody was going to think I was Syrian or Lebanese. Like, I couldn't fake it even if I wanted to. So I've learned that those things are called affect, not effect, affect. And affect won't help you. We can try to adopt those things and try to adapt to them to some degree. But ultimately, it's those human experiences of being able to laugh at yourself. Those are human experience of being able to cut through some things that's what gets us over that hump of needing the affect, which I think a lot of the conversation around cradle and convert to me boils down to affect. Forgive me.
Sure. Father George, did you want to add something to that since I kind of threw a loop there?
No, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff. I think, but I get back to the virtues that we're good at. This is one of the things that I have a real problem with online content now, and these guys that have their videos and their servers and things like that, is they talk about orthodoxy, but their tone and their approach is insulting and belittling, and it shows nothing. It doesn't display the virtues. These guys aren't patient. They're not kind, and well, you don't have to agree with these people. You're going to fight them. No, 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 no. I have people around me that I have very strong disagreements with, but I still treat them with respect because they're respectable people. Um, that's like a problem up here with the kind of a one group in particular. They're very kind of, it's almost like a totalitarian organization. They're a church, and they will ignore people around them if you're not part of their church. So I would go sit with one of their church members somewhere, and another member of their church would come up and start talking to them and ignore me because they knew that I wasn't part of their community. And what they hadn't realized is half of the people in Moscow, Idaho, despise the other group because that kind of behavior. You know, you don't have to like just to be kind and and show Christ's love to other people. It's not a moral compromise on your part. It's not compromising the Orthodox faith to say, "Well, I don't agree with you, but God bless you." I saw your hand up, so I need to shut up.
No, that's a mistake. I am corresponding with one of our attendees. Her name is Emily Zapantis, and she had a question, but we're out of time. So I emailed you the question at your leisure. If you want, if you can, just reply to me and I'll let Emily know. She does send her regards and thanks you all for being in attendance, as well as we do. It's a joy to be with you, fathers. I'm glad I could reunite Father Turbo and Father George. I know there's a sector in the Antiochian Archdiocese and even in the Serbian Archdiocese that kind of overlaps. There's a handful of priests. I won't name their names, but I go to I attend one of the priest parish, or I'm deacon of one of the parishes that kind of overlaps with. But just a reminder for the folks, Share the Faith Ministry is a one-of-a-kind ministry foundation in the United States. Father Turbo mentioned that kind of the classes trump ideology, and unfortunately, there's at least financially, there's kind of a class setting with priests because we do serve priests who obviously are mission priests and may not be financially established like others. And our aim is to support them. Believe it or not, more than 50% of the priests in the United States work secular jobs, and that could be a great hindrance to them. And they're working 40 plus hours a week at their jobs, plus at the parishes holding all the services. So our hearts go out to them, and our aim is to support them, provide them with monthly stipends. I think we support it. If I'm not wrong, around 12 priests. I should know this, but I turned 50 2 weeks ago, so my mind is going. Providing them with monthly stipends. That money goes to put food on the table, help with bills, and sometimes they can use it to help their missions as well. We are a donor-based organization, so we rely on donations to keep this moving forward. So please visit sharethefaith.net, and fathers, if you would spread the word for us. I'm happy to travel to the parishes and talk to parishioners. doesn't have to be to solicit funding. It could just be to get the word out that we exist. Again, we are pan-Orthodox, and I'm trying my darndest to kind of get to all the dioceses, archdioceses, patriarchates, to make sure that they're supported, that they know we're out there. Our aim is not to step on anyone's feet. We want to work with the bishops and the priests, and if there's a need, we want to provide with that need. This video will be eventually updated and uploaded into our YouTube page. You can find that YouTube page on Orthodox Christian Missions in America. Again, that's Orthodox Christian Missions to America. Fathers, thank you very much for taking time out of your day. I know some of you are, off to do Vespers now. Is there anything to add? Any questions? Any comments?
Well, I was just mentioning, sorry, going back to, I think as Father George talked about, well, I think a number of us talked about internet and the idea of not being respectful and how to deal with that. One book I found that's been very, very helpful for me for my converts is by Jeannie Constantino. I think it's called The Orthodox Mind. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
One of those. The first half of the book is, welcome to Orthodoxy. We're so glad you're here. The second is, get the heck off the internet. What are you doing? Quit talking about things you don't know. It's a great book. It's a great book for us trying to kind of reorient and say, okay, this isn't all about head knowledge. This is about how you relate to people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more so.
Thank you. That's a good resource. Thank you.